Right, well, welcome to the launch of Sleeping Under Clouds. I'm Roger Bloor from Calais Hanger Press, and I'm really pleased to be hosting this launch. Could I just ask everyone to just mute themselves so we don't interfere with the beauty of the poetry by having mobile phones, dogs, children, or any other distractions going on.
We lost internet connection.
So if everybody could mute themselves, if you don't, then I will take dictatorial action and mute everybody from a central button. And we are recording again, so if you don't want to be seen on screen at any time, then you can switch off your video section. And don't forget to use the chat all the way through to comment on the poems and the artwork. When Sue approached me with the manuscript for Sleeping Under Clouds, I was, I think, drawn in by the interaction of the poems and Sula's art, and we often describe these as collaborations. But actually what struck me was that poetry is always a collaboration. Poetry is a collaboration between the world, the poet and the reader, and the same is true of art. It's a collaboration between the artist, the picture and the world. And what we've got here is an interesting tapestry of collaboration, because we've got the poet's interpretation or reflection on the art, we've got the reader's interpretation of the poem, and we've got the view of the art modified perhaps by looking at the poem. So you've got this complex tapestry of things interweaving. I think that's a really powerful thing, and that's why I was really interested in the book, and I think it's come out really well. And just to say, if you've not actually bought one yet, then they are available, and we'll give you all the links and things afterwards. So what we're going to do is to listen to Sue reading some poems, listen to Sue and Sula discussing some of the poems and artwork, and we've got two guest readers. We've got Mary Mulholland and Claire Best reading to us as well. So I'm sure all of you know, but Sula Rubens is an artist who studied at Central St. Martin's School of Art with a BA, and is a painter and printmaker. She's lived, worked and exhibited in some fascinating places: Amsterdam, Gdansk, St. Petersburg, and collaborated with a lot of artists and poets and musicians and internationally. Her works are represented in public and private collections, including the Royal Watercolour Society Diploma Collection, and in 2014 she was appointed as the first artist in residence at the Michael House in Cambridge. 2019 she was elected to the Royal Watercolour Society as an associate member, and in 2022 was honoured with full membership. Sue has an MA in writing poetry from Newcastle University, from the Poetry School in London, and a pamphlet, City Waking Up, was published by Dempsey and Windle in October 2020. Her poems have been featured in a lot of magazines: London Grip, The Acrostic Review, Ink, Sweat and Tears, Poetry Space. And Sue writes regular poetry reviews for Sphinx Review, London Grip, and for the excellent poetry magazine The Alchemy Spoon, which Mary and I are co-editors of, together with Vanessa Lambert. And Sue is also secretary of the Suffolk Poetry Society and digital writer in residence for the Charles Causley Trust literary blog, The Maker. So what I'm going to do is to hand over to Sue and Sula, and they're going to talk to us about the collaboration, how it started, and how the book developed. Over to you.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you for a great introduction. So we thought we'd talk a bit about how we met and how we've been collaborating over the last few years. And then I'll read a few poems from the beginning of the book. And then we will have some guest poets. I would just like to say that Sarah Manatsa-Gagnon was going to join us as a guest reader, but sadly she had to pull out last minute for health reasons. So we're missing having her here, but I hope she gets better soon. So Sula, we first met back in 2019 at the end of the year in Aldborough, didn't we?
Yes. Yeah, we met in Aldborough. It was a kind of artist party, wasn't it? And we just got on, we were just talking about what you do and what I do, and that question of, and what do you paint? And I couldn't really, that's a very difficult question always. in words. So I sent Sue, because we got on well and she gave me her address. So I thought, oh, I'll send her an old catalogue from the previous exhibition. And I put it in an envelope and drew on the envelope. I drew a goat on the envelope. And yeah, that there it is. And so Sue wrote a poem about the envelope and the goat on the envelope, and sent it to me by email. And after that, she said, "Oh, I like the pictures in the. I'm interested in the pictures, and would you mind if I sent you some more poems?" And so we started talking about the poems that Sue would write, and we would think about what bits worked and what bits needed to go. Sue was very good at perceiving what is in the paintings, and then sometimes she found a new way into the paintings, which I found really interesting, because I just make the work and I'm thinking from my point of view. So it was interesting to have that aspect that Sue brought to the work, and like Roger was saying, it's part of the way a piece of work comes into the world, really.
I'm going to read that first poem I wrote, called Envelope Art. It's not in the book, but I'll read it to you. Envelope Art. The envelope has come alive. It slipped through the letterbox of my unsuspecting door, delivering unannounced a goat on the mat, which began a conversation over the next few days with every single person who sat in my kitchen, their surprise evident at seeing a curious kid peer from a painted envelope, jostling with my address like a piece of somewhere else come to visit for a while. So I'm lucky I've actually had more envelopes with paintings on too, so I'm thinking I shall start getting them framed soon. Yes, what happened, of course, next was COVID. So in 2020, when I started writing more poems, I was working from the photographs and images in the catalogue. So I wasn't seeing the artwork, in person. And I would send the poems to Sula and as drafts. And then she's extremely good at coming up with suggested changes or saying, well, that didn't quite fit. Or she would give me more background on what had inspired her to do the painting, and that would make me change the poem. Sometimes not very much, but other times quite a lot. So it was a kind of continuous process. And, I'm really pleased with how it worked out overall.
Well, it was fascinating because the way Sue's vocabulary is language and mine is not language, but language applies sometimes, and that was fascinating to see how language could work in relation to a painting for me.
So another thing that I found particularly interesting was Sula's use of maps. And so say something about that, Sula.
Well, the maps tend to be, the first maps I worked on were the ones I stole from school, on my old school atlas, which is completely out of date. Nobody would run after you for it because maps don't apply to what is really in the world now, because they're all completely out of date. Some of them have even got the empire on them. I wasn't at a very up-to-date school, I think. And I'm still using some of those maps. But the best thing about those maps was the paper quality. You could really give them a hard time with the watercolor. And the color quality was lovely. And sometimes you would just use that because it was beautiful. But I got more and more interested in the aspect of how a map has an authority on the world and the way you perceive the world, because you see all these lines and borders, and then putting a figure on a line or a border and letting the map show through is slightly subversive, and quite subversive in some cases. So some of the maps are done on maps of the US using the USSR map, which is completely different from our aspect of the map, because the UK is always in the top left corner somewhere, because it's not part of the USSR, so they're not interested in it. So it's very much focused on how a map is perceived before you get going on it. And I find that quite interesting. Sometimes just as a palimpsest, as a layer, and sometimes as a more political way of looking at what's happened to that bit of land and those people on it.
Yeah, so I find, I mean, I've travelled all around the world. I worked for the British Council for nearly 40 years and worked in Central and Eastern Europe and Russia and Nigeria and Spain, a whole range of countries. So that sort of international aspect of Sula's career and work was certainly of interest to me. So the poems and the paintings really are about displacement. And I talk of the poems being about journeying and kinship and survival and nurture. But they're very much from the perspective of children. And one thing Sula said was she sees children as more ambiguous than adults. You know, they don't have any choice about anything, and they're not sort of linked to any political or economic agenda in themselves. So I think there's a certain power in using or in featuring children throughout both our works. For me, one of the sort of things which I'm sure influenced my writing was the wave of migration from the Middle East, from Syria and Afghanistan, and the terrible scenes we were seeing of people trying to get into Greece and Bulgaria, and over a number of years, and also the photo that went around the world of the small Syrian Kurdish child who was carried out of the sea. He had drowned. So I'll mention that later. But, there were all those things that kind of haunted me in the back of my mind, and I think fed into the poems. So I'm going to read 3 poems now, which are from the maps section. And then I will come to one of our guest readers. This map has many paths, each route another choice, an atlas of possibilities, daunting in its scope. Roads stretch out, touching the distance, traced precisely like filigree lace, spun cobwebs, a silken invitation to fall between the lines, end up somewhere else. The next poem, Traces. This was published in a very nice, very lovely project called Personal History of Home, which Dr. Jenny Wong organised and was supported by Torch, the Oxford Research Centre in the Humanities. So it was published last year in October. And it has the lines from Leonard Cohen's lyrics from his song Boogie Street, So Lightly Here. And that links back to what Sula was saying about her use of maps and what can show through. Traces. Each line marks a border drawn by the suffering of humankind, a map where rivers, blue-veined, crisscross the skin of an ancient hand, delicate, paper-thin. People pass so lightly here. Curly heads droop, limbs tire. They seek a porous fence, a welcoming world, where they can rest, free of the cold, the wet, where children may sleep under roofs, not clouds. And the next one I'm going to read, Sula might say a couple of words at the end about goats. Goats have got a special place in her heart, I think. On the road, the nanny grubs around the tent for scraps of grass to eat. Her milk, warm and white, a source of sustenance in a barren landscape where little is sure. Wind-blown sand and flies crowd around her face. She remains close, tethered. She has no name. Soon they will pack and leave, shifting like desert dunes. The journeying will be long. She will not die where she was born. So Sula, just say a few words about goats and your connection with the theatre world and goats.
Yeah. As this series progressed, as Sue was just saying, it was quite a distressing, because I was very affected by the Arab Spring and the results of people moving and so on, and the attitudes of people just labelling people who were on the move, who had no choice but to leave, and had to leave very fast. And that really affected me. And it took a few years, about 5 years, before I could actually make any work about it, because it was so difficult to process. Well, it's just had to be processed somehow and to find a language. And then as I was working on this series, sometimes it would really get me it would actually. There were tears sometimes when I was working. It was I was sometimes very moved by something that I saw in a face that just came in because the people were a bit like characters in a play. They'd come up in the work like a cast, if you like. And then one day, in the end of 2017, I listened on the Today on a start of the week, I think it was already for, and there was a woman called Liwa Yazji, and she was a Syrian playwright, and she was talking about a play that was going to be put on at the Royal Court. And as I listened to her describing it, I thought, I've got to see this. So I took my son, and he was about 14 at the time, or not even that, I think. And everybody else took their children to some nice Christmas pantomimes. This is just before Christmas. And we went to the Royal Court to see a play called Goats. And when we got to the entrance, they said, we just need to make it clear that there is bad language on stage, there is smoking on stage, and there are live goats. And in we went. And the play was, it was brilliant in the sense that it was based on a true story, and it was very witty with a very gallows-like humour, very black humour. But the premise of it at the beginning was that the young men, or 17-year-olds who were suddenly now allowed to be 16-year-olds, were coming back as martyrs in boxes. And so the stage is set with these coffins with pictures of beautiful young men on them at the beginning of the play. And the elders of the village, the powers that be, decided that every family that lost a martyr, a son, would be given the goat. And so the goat, that was the premise of the play. And some people sort of looked after the goat as if it was still their son. Some people ate it. Some people, all sorts of things. But there were also other political aspects which carried on, and it was quite a complicated play. But the goats, as soon as they walked on, everybody just went, because they're funny, and they lightened the mood of this very serious anxiety-driven play, and they were just being goats basically, which was really. And suddenly after that, pretty soon after that play, my son really enjoyed it as well. And when I got home, I just found that the goats kind of crept into my paintings on days when I needed them. So they would be part of the series after that.
Well, they are. They're striking that they're there, and also I think as we talk about some other poems, we'll see there are some playful aspects to some of the poems in the book. So I'm now going to move on to introduce Mary Mulholland, who's our first guest reader, and Mary also did the Poetry School MA, as we mentioned, so she's become a good friend. Mary's poems have been widely published and featured in many competitions. She was most recently longlisted for the National Poetry Prize and the Rialto Nature and Place competition, and placed in the Wolves Lit Fest and Teignmouth competition. Her debut pamphlet, What the Sheep Taught Me, was published last summer by Live Canon. Her collaborations with Vasiliki Albedo and Simon Madrill, All About Our Mothers and All About Our Fathers, were published by 9 Pens in 2022 and this year. And she runs the platform Red Door Poets and co-edits The Alchemy Spoon. And I thoroughly recommend all those publications. They're great poems, so do go and buy all her books. So Mary, over to you.
Thank you so much, Sue. That's a lovely introduction. And first of all, congratulations to you and Sula, and also to Roger for putting it together so beautifully. I think Sula's paintings are wonderful, and your poems too. So it's a real honour to read here, and I love this book. And if you haven't got it, you've got to go out and get it. It's so beautiful. So I'm going to start with a poem that Sue requested, and just to say before this that my mother was Portuguese Guyanese and grew up in Guyana, and always carried the West Indian accent and musicality in her voice. So this is The Art of Daydreaming. My mother has sugarcane blood. She's made of mango, she's pineapple, dresses in laughter, passes darkness to her big bone daughter to wear. Sometimes my beautiful mother sings as she peels potatoes. Her voice is alto. When she tries soprano, she is a spider monkey. My beautiful mother's rings are loose on her fingers. She believes rubies and gold will bring her good luck. She likes to lose herself in dreams. She gazes beyond the garden, a capuchin and the rhododendron. She hears tree frogs and the ticking of the grandfather clock. And had I not gone to that Almodovar film that I didn't enjoy, I'd have answered her call, not heard her voice, too late to return, naming me in her sing-song way, as if saying goodbye. Sometimes we just get it wrong. That night I was too big-bone dumb. By next morning, my beautiful mother is wading back to childhood, ankle deep in warm rain. My mother is an Amazonian water lily afloat on dark water. Her petals unfurl like paper decoration. She doesn't see the caiman's amber eyes waiting, a green anaconda dangling from a branch, the harpy eagle that'll soar her to the canopy's green mantle. My mother doesn't like green. Her breathing is the ocean. She's rushing in to pause on the Demerara silt shore, then rushing out to rejoin the horizon. Her waves are thrashing the seawall. She's wearing foam lace, ribboning the air with clouds that shapeshift and turn electric blue. My butterfly mother is sky. So some of the artwork I noticed, and we've been, Sula's just been talking about, and Sue, we've been talking about goats, and I've noticed there are lambs and goats in this. So it feels very appropriate to read a couple of poems from my debut pamphlet, What the Sheep Taught Me, which as Sue said, came out last summer from Live Canon. So sometimes I farm sit at this farm in Wiltshire, and I'm there right now. There are about 300 to 400 sheep, and they're not white and woolly, but hair sheep, Barbados blackbelly sheep. So they look a bit like goats. And just to know that sheep also have 340-degree vision, which is pretty crazy. So I'm going to read the two parts of the title poem, What the Sheep Taught Me. All day I have watched the ewes, trying to see as they do everything at once. I think best sequentially. It's getting towards evening. The sheep know this too. They are starting their sunset corral of the field perimeter, practicing for the national, leaping like antelope. Even the large one bearing triplets, she soars over the electric fence. She's made of spring. All those fences I could have jumped. I take a run. The shock sends me flying. 2. Sheep invented Follow My Leader. See how they charged the new field like a wake chasing a boat. Even the ewe giving birth is running, a little head bobbing under her tail. They form in crowds and outcasts, like at a cocktail party, polite at first, calmly grazing, then shoving each other, bitching, gossiping. To say all sheep are the same is a mother who finds no difference between her children. We were all mostly good, unremarkable, called child. So I stayed at the farm for the first lockdown. That year there were a lot of eclipses, and that was also the year that I first became aware of the names given to the full moon. So May this year is a particularly good time for stargazing, and right now we have the flower moon, which is a full moon, and tomorrow, Friday, it's going to be an eclipse, so it felt appropriate to read this following one, which will be my final one. Demands. It's the night when witches fly, when the moon's too close, too full. She is weighed down like a warrior, an actress playing multiple roles. When I came here, she was wolf, she was crow, soon she'll be blue. She'll be flower, especially rose, then milk and corn planting, providing, so little support. 3 days a month are not enough. All these demands on her time. No wonder she's cloud hidden, dreaming up pithy slogans, reflecting on her rights, planning strikes. Thank you. And thank you, and congratulations once again, Sue, Sula and Roger.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary. They were just wonderful poems, so full of colourful imagery and life. I love those. Now I'm going to invite Claire Best to read. Claire, I went to see when I was first looking for a publisher for this book, and she generously gave me a bit of time, and I showed her 1 or 2 poems and we chatted about it. And then when we'd finished the book, I thought, well, I will dare to ask her to write an endorsement. So she very kindly agreed and wrote some very poetic, wonderful words for the back of the book. So thank you very much, Claire, for that. Claire has published a memoir, The Missing List, 2 full collections of poetry and several pamphlets and collaborative works. Her latest is End of Season, Fine de Stagione, from Frogmore Press in 2022. Her 3rd full collection, Beyond the Gate, is coming out soon, from Warple Press in the summer. Claire often collaborates with visual artists and composers, and in 2021, she was a fellow at Guildhall School of Music and Drama. So Claire, over to you.
Thank you so much, Sue. It's absolutely wonderful to be here, to be part of the sort of launching of this beautiful book and this beautiful collaboration. It really is something to congratulate you all on, Sue and Sula and Roger and everybody. A quite wonderful thing. So I thought I would read 3 poems. I'm going to start with a poem from my first collection called Matryoshka, which, as everyone will know, is the stacking Russian dolls all inside each other. And I just thought there was something about the way that Sue and Sula look at children and look at kinship and look at the whole, sort of human condition, really, which made me think of this. Matryoshka. This is great-grandmother holding the past, the future, life within life, years of dancing, burying the dead. She sits and sits, not wanting sleep, eyes wide open. This is grandmother holding the baby who cries and grows. The weight of the child keeps her feet on the ground. They have the same hands, she and the child. This is mother, her green eyes full of the sea. She brings fish and bread to the table and feeds them all. They eat and eat. She cannot rest. She's tired, tired. This is the girl ready to bud, the girl with the bluebird, dreaming a boy, his laugh, his kiss, the weight of his hips. She holds the bird to her breast and sleeps. This is the baby held and held and held and held. This is the baby holding the apple she can't yet bite. This is the weight, the grievous weight. This is great-grandmother, grandmother, tired mother loving the child, the girl with the bluebird, the baby, the seed. And I thought I would read a poem which kind of connects with the map idea and the ideas of layering of mapping. It's very much a Suffolk poem, and I found that when we came to live in Suffolk 5 years ago, every journey I made was a journey of discovery. And then I bought a set of old maps, 200-year-old maps, to give my partner for a big birthday present. And one day we decided to go and see a friend by using this 200-year-old map. Using Greenwood's large-scale map of the county of Suffolk, 1825, to find my friend's house. Slow through rain and murk, down School Lane, past the gate to Captain's Wood, left on Ferry Road, left again by Red House Farm, and then a mile of Roman road and sandy track. Back 200 years along dotted lines, between black ditches, over wooden bridges to the edge of the eastern reaches. Fields dissolve, the settle of shingle almost audible. Somewhere close, an invisible river lags its silty way through marsh and curlew country. He calls it his lonely house, this place at the land's precarious rim. I hear him slide the bolt of the old oak door, see him standing tall in a shutter of light. And finally, I have a fig tree in my garden here, and it's a very productive fig tree. And last year, I actually harvested the last fig in December. And this poem is also from my new collection, which is coming out next month. Late Fig. Midwinter gift hangs in thin air. After a fig summer, when I learned to gorge figs and goat's cheese and honey with bread rich as Christmas pudding, long summer of squeezing lemon moons over fine fig slices to make fig flesh bleed, then feasting on it, lemon reddened. After that, I fear disappointment. But this single fig-surpassing fig has fully perfect unsplit satin fig skin, purple-green, darkly tender. I reach up, and the gift gives slightly to my carefully cultivated fig touch. Does not resist a fig knife, cutting it against white porcelain. This precious late fruit proves super fig charged with intricate red, pink and butter-colored raveled riches, and there at its center, a mysterious shady hollow, the very heart of figness. Thank you.
That was wonderful. Thank you very much, Claire. I like the buttercup raveled richness. And I didn't know there was such thing as a fig knife. So there you go. But wonderful poems. Thank you so much for sharing them, and good luck with the book coming out.
Thank you.
Your Matryoshka poem actually leads in very nicely to the next two poems I'm going to read. And the way we're doing the rest of our hour with everybody is I will read 2 or 3 poems and then have a break, and then Sula and I will discuss those poems, and then we'll do another mini set, if you like, so you get a chance to look at the paintings as well. So the first one I'm going to read is Held. And for this, Sula had an epigraph, protecting till the danger passed with human love, which is from Prayer for My Son by W.B. Yeats. Held. The lines are clean, strokes bold, drawn to each other they rest, the child nestling into her body, his shoulder rounded. He stares back into the blue. Her hand protective holds him still. There's solidity in the gesture, a certainty which states no one may come between. She remembers how it felt to hold him, newly born, the warmth of his tiny body, milk soft against her breast. She has no choice. She knows she must keep him safe. She sees what he cannot. And the next poem is Mother and Child. A quiet moment of give and take, hand outstretched, thumb caressing lip, an answering smile, a softened gaze, skin touching skin, a whispered kiss. For now, at least, they own this world. So, Sula, I know that at least one of these paintings was very personal. So, could you say a bit about that?
Well, the first one, which I thought you got a lovely feeling about in the poem, but the painting began as a self-portrait, I didn't quite know how it was going to happen. I hadn't done oil painting for a long time, and I did it in about 3 days, but it changed so much. There were other figures in it, in the background, and then they turned into land, and the child appeared, and the hand appeared. So it was a very instinctive painting, if you like. And yes, it was kind of me with a child of my, well, I've got one child, but it became quite a monumental self-portrait of a child and a mother, really, for me. That was really what led into the series of Kin. That was the first painting, and then about 2 months later, the whole series just rushed out from that.
Yes, and in fact, that one, when I write about the child being milk soft or against the breast, that was me remembering my children when they're so tiny and you just kind of cup them here, they just sort of fit. It lasts about a week, but it's a lovely memory.
It's a very universal feeling as well, because when I had my son, I was thinking about that feeling of like, when you hear history written and you always hear about who did what and who invaded where, and like they are now and like they always will. And if you look back in Napoleon's time, you know what women were doing. They were doing exactly that. That's what they always did. They always had to do, someone had to do it.
Yeah.
And so it's a very universal subject, really.
Yeah. And you sent me Mother and Child. Well, it was your painting,
that was
Madonna
later.
Child, for Christmas, a Christmas card. That was a lovely Christmas card to get.
Yeah, that was much later, but and a more literal, because that's with reference to the millions probably of Madonna and Childs that you see all over the world in churches, and that had a reference to that, really. But protecting hand is important as well. I do a lot with the hands in the paintings. They're important.
Thank you. So the next poem I'm going to read is In the Air. And I'll just say that one of the things that this brought back to me was a memory of children kicking around footballs in Sudan. And as many people on this Zoom will know, my family and husband are in Sudan. So I'm going to dedicate this poem to them, hoping they're surviving all right in the terrible times in Khartoum. But the kids there play football all over the place. And it's the same in many countries, I know. In the air, hanging like a half moon, the football greets the sky, headed firmly in the air. A memory of days at home, kicking around with friends, bare feet in the dust. Before their world broke apart, the pitch blown up, their games disrupted. Now they find a spot wherever they can, join together to field a team. Each game a chance to laugh, to meet on common ground. And the next poem, Umbrella. This was published by Finnish Creatures magazine, issue 7 in March. That's a wonderful magazine. Publishes a terrific range of poets. Umbrella. A colourful semaphore of sorts, the washing billows on the line. The umbrella, a little out of place with its flowery border on blue, might give shelter from the sun, though the season looks cool. The boy owns it with pride, a distinctive accessory to tote. He prefers to be observer and watch the others play. Rain is nowhere in sight. Dry dust will soon be kicked up by bike, football, games of chase. Just add 2 curious kids to the mix. So you can see the goats came in here, because originally I had that they would have a chance to laugh, forget candles burning, a flame going out, which was a rather dark ending. So we had a discussion about that, and it's become much more sort of centered around the children's experience and their games, and how actually they have a sense of release through playing games, and they have that sort of common ground, children from all nationalities meeting together on the road. So I think, that really helped my poem, Sula's intervention.
Yeah, I remember thinking, because the thing is, when children play, they really concentrate. And whether it's playing a game of football or imagining a piece of wood as a man, whatever it is, you really, that is it. You're completely in that world. And while you're doing the playing, and then after that, other things happen. And many of these paintings are about those moments when the painting happens for the children.
Yeah, I think moments is a good way to describe some of the poems and some of the paintings. I'm going to read 3 which are very much about children and at play, really. Framed. The boy's hands embrace the mackerel striped tabby, feel his beating heart. Both look at us with steady gaze, as if staring into a mirror, image fixed in the doorway. Unusually still for a cat, fur soft. He's named after an Arab city known for fashioning silk cloth. Sharp-eared, he listens out for sounds, his whiskers alert, ready to sense possible prey. How long before he struggles to free himself from this frame? Will he be wild again? The next poem is Weighing Up the Options. The tire's tread appears good, several hundred miles to go, ready to be rolled with ease. A useful find. The children dream of playing games, of lodging them in the sand, then weaving in and out, or straddling the tops, testing their imagination. They don't have much to brighten their days, no expensive gift-wrapped toys. They even hope to cajole grown-ups to bring a swing for their childish pleasure. On the sofa. This sofa is weary. Its cushions no longer plump, the cream pipings limp. How many children have pummeled the stuffing, jumped, pillow fought, feathers flying? Now stranded on a beach, exposed, alone. It's uncertain who might grace its faded dignity. A group of children wander up, arrange themselves, chat as if waiting to be photographed. So again, I'd just like to mention for the one about weighing up the options, that this one was quite a dark poem as well. And Sula was inspired by a photograph by the photographer Dooley of children fleeing from Darawan, the Yemeni children. And originally when I thought of tires, I thought of children and adults burning tires in Syria to make smoke screens to stop air attacks. So that's what I ended up writing about. But again, this changed into a much more playful poem when I sort of centered it more about, you know, what the children might be doing with their imagination. Would you say something about Framed, Sula, and the other poem, which is also about the boy and the cat that's in the book?
Yes, they both the cat paintings. This one was the second, and both of them happened when I read an article in The Guardian about a boy in a Jordanian refugee camp, and he had befriended a cat, and the cat had befriended him, and the boy was called Fadi, and he'd called the cat Aleppo because that's where he came from, and that's all I read really in the article. Well, among other things in the article, and that touched me. And so that's where the painting began for me. And so they have this connection because somebody looked at that painting and said to me, that cat, he's just saying, who the hell are you? He's a very wild cat, but he's letting himself be with the boy, and the boy's they've got a mutual understanding.
Yes, we did wonder whether, you know, having two images that are almost the same, you know, how to place them in the book. So we spread them out, but they did inspire different poems, and I think it works all right. You get a slightly, I think that's an interesting thing as well, is how, you know, almost the same image can actually inspire different poems. So that was quite interesting as well. I'm going to move on to the next two poems. The next one is really quite a simple poem. Kin. Mountains and olive trees encircle the young goat herds, pretty in their cotton dresses. The elder girl, a mother figure, comfortable in her skin, clasps the wrist of her sister, looking after her own, just as the goat tends to her kids, a bell to ward off wolves. And the next poem, the cover of the book comes from this image, and I just think it's wonderful. I'm so pleased it's on the cover because for me it's quite iconic, and it does actually remind me of this child, Alan Kurdi, who drowned 2nd September 2015, that was in the news. Although it's not directly exactly the same, but it just, the role of the sea influenced how I wrote about this. Rising. Head against cheek, arms holding tight. They rise from the water like disembodied ghosts. No words to explain from where they have come. The sea is a foreign place. Not all will escape. Sula, would you like to say something about that one?
Well, I wanted the boy obviously they could all be called kin, because you never quite know, for me in the paintings, whether that boy is a brother, whether of the little one, or if he's just pulled him out the water, or if they're just, one of them really needs help and the other one probably needs help, but they found each other. And so that's what I found so beautiful about the poem, because it gives a little bit of a hint of what might have happened. And that was also that was one of 2 paintings that I did on watercolors. I did on top of a Russian, well, it was a USSR map. It's a map of the USSR, and you can see where the color is on the child's t-shirt. That's part of the USSR, and all the blank land and the rest is sea or not USSR. And again, coming back to this thing about authority of maps. So the white area on the boy's hand, that's out of the USSR, that hand, you know, and he's holding on to the child who's a bit in the USSR, and there's no USSR on either of their faces. So those kind of things matter. It took a long time to get the figures in the right place on that map, because I didn't want them to have colour on their heads. So sometimes you know what the colour means on the map with that one, because it was USSR, and I didn't want that. I wanted the heads to be separate from the empire.
Yeah, so that's absolutely fascinating. I hadn't realised that actually till we've been talking over the last couple of weeks, that you were so careful at placing where.
Oh yeah, no, they were. I mean, he was right at the top, and I didn't really want the boy to have legs because I didn't need them really. I just wanted that clasping thing, and so if it was important to have it in the right place. And with watercolor, you have to be quite careful that you don't overload the paper, because then that's it. You can't do anymore.
Okay, I'm going on to the next one. This is slightly different, and it is following geese or a goose. And there are a number of poems I've not been reading about geese that are in this, and a lamb that are in this book. I did read other poems at our Norwich talk last weekend, so I've deliberately chosen not to read the same poems again in case anybody came to both things. Flight. They travel with the wind, wings outstretched, tip to tip, whole families on the move, rivers and coastlines beneath. The land holds no borders for them. Maps have no use. They follow their instincts, that inner compass set to guide them surely home. Above our heads, the song of their shadows announces their passage through our lives. And the last poem in the book is Passage. I've actually bought this painting, so I'm looking forward to having it hanging in my house. The ground is hard, even stony, but a tired head needs a place to rest. Tucked up under a tasseled rug, the child holds on to a ragged bear, a small comfort by his side. Tomorrow they'll pack up, follow the edge of fields, looking out for food to forage. They'll hope for dull weather, neither rain nor blazing sun. Each footstep marks the distance travelled, shoes wearing thin. Gripped by a steady hand or carried shoulder high, the child holds tight till night falls and he sleeps again. So for me, these two poems, the one about the geese is really a metaphor for obviously people on the move crossing over Europe, and the way that sometimes they make the news and the other time they don't, but you're kind of aware of this migration group trying to cross Europe. And in Passage, I'm trying to get across that there's this sort of day in, day out aspect to being on the move. You know, you have to cope with what the day brings, and then you try and get to sleep, and then next day you've got the same thing, you've got to cope again. So I hope that comes across in the poem. Sula, do you would like to add something?
Yeah, while you were reading that, I just had a little idea in my living on the windowsill. I made this sofa out of ceramic once, and that is the model for the painting which you wrote a poem about. It's a real sofa, but it's rakufied, and you can take all the cushions off. And that was in my studio when I made that painting. That's just a little aside, anyway. But that was my sofa when I lived in 1997 when I'd come back from Poland. So what I was just remembering was sometimes things are with you a long time. Like the map was with me since 1997 as well, the one from St. Petersburg. So sometimes things hang about in your life until they come into their own. So that's just another little thing. But the flight one, if you look at that painting, at the bottom left of the painting, there is an arrow, and the arrow is pointing towards Africa. And I always think that's really bizarre, because a bird wouldn't know that. The bird just knows where it's flying. But there's an arrow on the map saying Africa. You can see it's just on the bottom left, just near my signature. Yes, there.
Let's see, but anyway, that's a lovely painting. Okay, and then to close, I'm going to go back to 3 poems from the beginning of the book, which are from the maps oversight, which I think, having looked at some of the paintings, they probably have an extra degree of resonance for you. History lesson. Each map serves a purpose, filling the canvas with hope. Foreign-sounding names, difficult to pronounce. Places with their own history of war and suffering, floods and drought. Places haunted by shifting patterns of people seeking shelter, seeking peace. Sometimes the lines are faint, sometimes coloured bold. They serve to remind me places reinvent themselves, new lives, building on the old. Background music. This poem I wrote partly because Sula also paints musicians, and I wanted to bring that in some way. The music features in this one. Brushstrokes create the scene before my eyes, the backstory, a narrative of disrupted lives. If music were added, there'd be a powerful score, punctuated by moments of calm. The strings would stretch their wings, drums beat to the incessant pad of steps. There'd be an orchestra of sound, the brass strident in their demands, the clash of cymbals, accompanied by a liquid run of piano notes. A percussion of children would enliven the road with a ting-ting of triangles, tambourines in small hands, bright brittleness of a xylophone, the ringing of some bells. I also hear howling wind, slash of rain, breath of bodies huddled for warmth when the sea is done. And the last poem I'm going to read, I wrote very recently, and I wrote it particularly because I'm conscious that obviously I haven't lived any of this experience, so I could be criticised for writing about something I don't actually know anything about, but I think it's still valid as a poet to write about, as well, obviously in response to the artwork I've seen, and also in terms of thinking about what my own reaction is to life events like this. Questions. If I had to walk that far, I'd get blisters on my feet. my skin would crack, hair straggle down my back. I'd complain of my lot, find it hard to keep my spirits up. I wouldn't have the memories these children have buried deep. I haven't faced the destruction of my home, lived the journey across maps that make them who they are. If I was given no choice, caught in the thread of fate, how would I react? Walking step by slow step, would I bond with others by my side, yet hold my identity fast? So I'd like to just thank everybody, Mary and Claire in particular for reading, and Roger for doing a terrific job on the book. We're really delighted with it. Sula for being a lovely friend and collaborator, and all of you for coming. It's so nice to see so many nice friends, friendly faces. Thank you. I've really enjoyed sharing my launch with you.
The time has probably come for everybody to unmute themselves and give a rousing applause, whoops, or whatever you really want to Sue, Sula, and our readers.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Brilliant. Really enjoyed it. A wonderful journey. Thank you.
Thank you.
Beautiful set of poems.
Well, thank you so much.
Moving.
And pictures. The pictures are wonderful.
So we've come to the end of the launch. I would be remiss if I didn't advise you where to buy the book. So the book is available from Clayhanger Press. The link's in the chat. It's also available from Sue and Sula, and also from the Backside Gallery in London, if you're visiting London, and from select and reputable independent bookshops in Suffolk as well. And we've recorded this, so if you missed any of it, then given a little bit of time, I'll get it up onto the Clayhanger Press YouTube site, so you'll be able to look at it again and look at all the interesting pictures and hear all the interesting words again. So thank you very much. Have a safe journey home, which isn't very far tonight, is it really? And don't forget that small presses survive on people buying books. And thanks very much to Sue and Sula for letting me publish this. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Roger. Up to you.
Very much, Roger.
You want to mention your latest publication, Roger, for anybody who's still here?
Yes, indeed. So the collected poems of Arnold Bennett. Arnold Bennett, the brilliant novelist, not so great at being a poet, but this explores why such a great novelist felt he wanted to be a poet. A beautiful hardback, available from Clayhanger Press at a mere £20 a snip, and it contains details of all the poems, commentaries on the poems, and Arnold Bennett's and written versions of some of them as well.
Roger has a terrific range of books that he's publishing with tremendous care. And I write reviews for the Alchemy Spoon, which he and Mary edit. And that's particularly interested in new phase poets. So poets who have come to the game a bit older, but very much wiser. So if you want to read good reviews and good poetry and articles and interviews, I recommend that.
There's one, it's got a submission window open right now.
Oh, right, and that too, yes.
With the theme of friends. Anyway, thank you all very much, and seeing you at our next launch, hopefully.
Yes.
Sue and Sula, it was wonderful. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this. I've loved it. And congratulations, Roger, on making it so beautiful.
Thank you for all being so positive and interested as well. As to, I'm very aware that after, I was just thinking that when we did the reading the other day, when COVID got finished, or for the time being anyway, and everybody's got so many other things they could be doing. And I think it's rather wonderful that people are still interested in listening to poetry and looking at paintings. Art feeds the soul. Yes.
It's life-saving.
Absolutely. I think so. Feeds the soul. Yes.
Thank you for a lovely evening. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you for inviting me.
Bye, Sue.
Thank you from Amsterdam.
Oh, Kate, glad you could make it. That's great.
Thanks both. We really enjoyed it. It was such a special book.
This is the daughter I was saying wasn't making it. She arrived. Well
No, I was a bit late as always, but I made it.
Congratulations. It was really
yeah,
great.
congratulations. It's just wonderful.
Your daughter crept in quietly.
Yes. Okay, well, that's good. I'm glad there was a member of family present. So I've got proof. I did actually do this.